Hey, melon farmers. Welcome back to the NOTCAST number 378, Sunday, 21st of April, 2024. And 5 years ago this week, I was seeing Suede in Bristol, which was lovely. I do not like that venue in Bristol. It's too small, too long and too small. That also used to be known as the Bristol Locarno. And 4 years ago, I was at home wondering if we were ever going to leave the house ever again. To which the answer is, of course, no, we're not. Well, at least we didn't for 18 months. Hence, when I started off doing these YouTube things about 3.5 years ago, I thought I really miss talking to my friends. I really miss my friends. I really miss going out. I really miss going to gigs. I know what I'll do. I'll start a YouTube like every other bald middle-aged man with a record collection on the internet. And lo and behold, here we still are. Today I am going to be talking about the Flaming Lips, which I don't often do. And I know Flaming Lips ones don't get the kind of viewer numbers that I normally do. I don't know why. Maybe because the Flaming Lips are a fairly niche American band that don't sell a huge amount of records. They're not particularly huge. They're probably a slightly more popular version of someone like Guided by Voices, actually, in so much as they release a lot of material and a lot of albums, and they all seem to be working. And they're like, whoa, I don't want to be breaking that now. And their lineup seems to be changing. This is where I hover out of shot. Yeah, so their lineup seems to change fairly regularly. So this is, I've never actually pronounced the name of this record before. I think it's their 14th studio album, something like that. This was, let's just make sure if we can get it correctly. Oczy Mlody, which was recorded in June 2012 to June 2016 and released in early January 2017. There is a couple of albums that come before it. There's one that comes after. In fact, there's several that come after. And that's the thing with the Flaming Lips. If you don't like a Flaming Lips album, there's going to be another one along in about 9 months anyway. And that's going to be another bunch of weird psychedelic space rock from Americans that clearly take quite a few drugs, allegedly, but are never explicit about it. So, there we have it. Also, the Flaming Lips did do an album in 2015. I don't think it's physically been released. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have tried to track down a copy of it. It's by a band called Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets that was uploaded to SoundCloud on the 30th of August 2015. And Miley Cyrus started working with the Flaming Lips for when they did the Heady Friends album in 2014, the song-by-song cover of the Beatles, where she sang on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Day in the Life. For the album Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets, which I don't have, it is effectively the Flaming Lips were her backing band. The album was recorded quietly and in secret. It cost about $50,000 to make. And Miley Cyrus has the Flaming Lips as her backing band. So effectively you get a Flaming Lips album with her singing, which they repeated later on in 2021 with Where the Viaduct Looms, with Nell, which I will talk about in the next Flaming Lips episode. But in case you don't know it, don't have it, haven't heard of it, do see if you can track down and listen to Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets album. The first half of the album, because it's quite long, it's a double record. I think there was a very limited vinyl release that was sold at some Miley Cyrus shows in 2015. But aside from that, it's not had a retail release. It was uploaded to SoundCloud, sold as a vinyl in a limited edition at some shows, and then is now available to download from iTunes, etc., as of 2017. The first half of the album, if you haven't heard it, is very Flaming Lips style, very lush, psychedelic, upbeat pop. So more kind of leaning into the kind of sound that the band had around the Yoshimi Soft Bulletin size. The second half is more influenced by outright pop music. So people like, I guess, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, all those type of things. I don't connect to that part of it at all too much. I have a deep love of a very particularly English brand of pop, or a very British flavour of pop. And American pop doesn't really work for me. There's a degree of guile which I prefer to have, which I can hear in things like Sophie Ellis-Bextor and Kylie Minogue, not so much in people like Madonna and Taylor Swift. And yeah, I mean, I respect Taylor Swift. She is very talented and has lots of skills. What she does doesn't really work for me, I think it's fair to say, but that doesn't mean that it isn't good. It's just not my type of thing. Like if someone put the best, like, the best ever prawns or lobsters or anything in front of me, and I go, but I don't like them. That's the thing. So there we have it. RCA, Cyrus's label, effectively allowed it to come out, but it wasn't on the contract, didn't count against the contractual obligations that she had. And that kind of stood at odds a little bit, as I've mentioned previously, with the idea of what makes an artist, what identifies an artist to be who they are, what makes a band a band. And Miley Cyrus kind of, and lots of other people have done this as well, took the view that whatever I want to do is a fair and accurate representation of me. And sometimes people go, no, you're that person, you do that thing. So, for example, if you're Sylvester Stallone and you make Rocky and you make Rambo, and then you want to go off and make Paradise Alley or Fist or something, people go, that's not really Sylvester Stallone. And it's like, well, who are you to tell me who I actually am? Fully rounded, fully faceted human being. Whereas sometimes people will go, no, you only belong in that particular box. Now, I'm not suggesting that bands shouldn't respect their audiences or should only follow their artistic muse in whatever direction it goes. If you're not careful, you end up with a Damon Albarn situation where he's got about 10 different bands all reflecting different parts of his personality and not a fully rounded whole in any one of them. But more to think about. As a listener, you can tell when an artist is being insincere. You can tell when an artist hasn't got their heart in it. And I've seen shows where I thought, no, it's a day at work for them, isn't it? The office is a stage. They're not enjoying it. This isn't who they want to be. They don't want to be on tour or whatever. I've seen shambolic shows by bands that are clearly only in it for the money. I've seen great shows by bands that are just punching in a time clock and then off they go. The best kind of thing, and when you work in the music industry, is the road is hard. I mean, touring is tough. Being an artist is tough. It's not vastly rewarding. You've really got to like what you do. If you don't like what you do, you shouldn't be doing it. You should clear the space for somebody that's going to love that opportunity. But at the same point, the idea of a record label saying this isn't who you are, well, you go, well, you don't tell me who I am. I tell me who I am, and then you as a record label, your job is to market that. It also blurs the line around what is a band, and that is the kind of thing that the Flaming Lips are at this point. The Flaming Lips seems to be a name for a collective of musicians with an ever-rotating cast of members. Cliff's gone. Jake Inglis joined the band in 2013, and is by the time we get to this, is a fully fledged member of the group. Matt Kinsey is on keys and drums. Nicholas Lag is on drums and percussion. Mike is still part of the band as bass player. Stephen Droz, Wayne Coyne. So, the Flaming Lips has become a pretty big organisation on and off stage. Self-autonomous, self-directed, signed to Bella Union, able to follow whatever direction that they want their music to go in, and to be able to realise who they actually are. Now, that makes you wonder, what is a band? Is a band a collective? Is it a series of artists working together? Is it like a business that happened to be in the business of selling, producing music and merch? And you think about someone like Tangerine Dream, whose lineup changed dramatically over the years, and who only had one member throughout, or one solid member, like The Wedding Present, over the course of their lifespan, where the music itself was almost secondary to the running of the operation and the business. I always got the feeling that Edgar Froese in Tangerine Dream was less bothered about the music than he was about the logistics, and quite happy to kind of parcel out responsibility for the band's musical activity to other people inside the group, which is a really interesting way of approaching it. Whatever they did, it didn't always sound like Tangerine Dream. And when you think about, well, please don't think about albums like Raccoon or, Madcap's Flaming Lunacy or whatever it's called. You end up kind of going, how can this band be the band that made Poland or the band that made Rubicon? They just don't sound the same at all. And when you get to Raccoon in 1992, that most of you will have never heard of, it's a 5-piece band with, I think, a Polish fret wanky metal guy in, and you kind of go, ooh, not so sure about that at all. But then I guess part of that is going, well, that's part of creating a well-rounded artistic identity that reflects all parts of your personalities and your tastes. Whereas, sometimes you put on a Beck song or someone, and you go, I have no idea what this is going to sound like. Is it going to be like a 30-second thrash act called Everyone's Out to Get Me Motherfucker, or is it going to be like a 6-minute ballad called The Song of the Seas, which sounds like the end of the universe, or is it going to be a funk track like Prince, and it's going to be called Funking Hell or something? Who knows? I mean, obviously, these days and ages, what a band is and what it chooses to be is very different. In most people's eyes, we have a limited view of what a band is. You know, we kind of like recognise the singer most of the time, maybe another dude who's on stage. It doesn't necessarily matter who the bass player is, hence the phrase sleeper bloke. Although Sleeper have had a very stable lineup compared to certain bands. I saw The Wedding Present in August and I saw them in December. And the only person that was in the same lineup of the group in December was the singer and guitar player. Bassist, drummer, second guitarist had all changed for various reasons. And, you know, sometimes that's personal, sometimes that's musical, sometimes that's something else. It's money. But, you know, the idea of a band is a fluid concept necessarily. Although, of course, if you're, I don't know, Chuck Berry or somebody, and you just pick up a different bunch of musicians for every show that you play or every country that you play, largely that's dictated by money. Whereas the Flaming Lips seem to have evolved constantly, having a constantly rotating series of members that have picked up various things over the time. And it's effectively a small business with a music studio that's in there. Music is one of their areas of merchandise. Weird T-shirts, strange bits of merch, unusual ideas, live shows are all part of that. And to think of bands as being just musicians is to kind of, I think, be a little bit naive. And I'm naive about that, you know? When I see Metallica fucking break mats, Kiss coffins, you know, Pink Floyd scarves, and I'm kind of going, that's just fripperies, isn't it? It's nonsense. And then you get the USB skull that the Flaming Lips put together with a 24-hour song on it called Seven Skies H3, and you kind of go, okay, so that really is a thing. Yeah, that's merchandise. It's pushing the art form around what it is. Whereas, and then when you have someone like Miley Cyrus that looks at how, say, self-identify and go, this is as much a valid part of my artistic creation as perhaps the more pop stuff that I've done. And when Taylor Swift moves away from country into more pop, when Moby goes and does a death metal album called Animal Rights, you know, those are all facets of the same individual. And it's very limiting to think that there's only one artistic identity or one artistic approach that anyone can take. And with this new lineup of the band, with Jake and Matt and Nicholas Legg, Mike Ivins and Steve Drost, and of course Wayne Coyne, the first recording that they did that's covered under this is the Soft Bulletin, music and songs by the Flaming Lips, featuring the Colorado Symphony Orchestra, which I think is recorded live at the Hollywood Bowl, I think. Let me just quickly check. No, Red Rocks Amphitheatre with the Colorado Symphony. So that's Red Rocks, which is exactly where U2 recorded Under a Blood Red Sky video 40 years ago now, and 33 years before this show was recorded. So this was recorded and released in 2016. There was another recording from Hollywood that was released as a USB stick, I think, in 2011 at a show. And this is a very good live release. It's not amazing. It just presents the songs from the Soft Bulletin and nothing else in order. A 12-song album played live. And of course, these days, you know, there's a nostalgia around songs or albums being performed live completely in front of audiences, which respects the integrity of the vinyl sequencing. But vinyl sequencing and concert sequencing are two very, very different experiences, as I've kind of mentioned in a previous episode. Although I do get the impression that this would have been quite a show to see, actually. So recorded live, Red Rocks, May 25th, 2016. And there's not an anniversary around that. It's not like, you know, it's just 17 years since the album came out, and they felt like playing it with an orchestra. And that's the thing, is when you've got an artistic identity, you can choose what you want to do. You can choose who you're going to be. And so there we are. And again, this is a fairly standard. Let me just quickly check. Yeah, it's the black vinyl edition with mind-blowing covers that just makes you feel that you kind of got an insight into a world which doesn't necessarily exist. So for me, Flaming Lips albums are very much kind of, sideways glimpses at life in a world which you recognise, but from an angle you haven't necessarily seen it, and an emotional temperature that goes with it. I'm not a huge fan of bands playing albums in full unless they've only got one album, and the band is called the Sex Pistols. I prefer non-album theme shows, but also as a musician, if you play the same songs day in, day out for decades and decades on end, if you're Guns N' Roses and you're playing the same 22 songs for 30 years in a row, or if you're Roger Waters and you're playing the same, well, considering that Pink Floyd songs are longer, if you're playing the same 17 songs in the same order for 30 years in a row, it must get really dull, actually. It must get really boring. And then it becomes a point where it's more like watching a stage play made of songs as opposed to anything else. So, credit to the Flaming Lips for doing something a little bit different and a little bit more ambitious than perhaps you might necessarily have thought they would have done. 2017, 2016, saw the release of something else as well. And this is a single. It is Space Oddity, a cover of the David Bowie classic, backed with a track called Jest. And these were, again, recorded by Wayne, Stephen, Michael, Derek Brown, Jake Ingalls, Matt Duckworth and Nicholas Lay. So we've got a 7-piece version of the band at this point. Derek having joined the group a number of years previously. This was released 2017, around about the same time as the Oczy Mlody album. That said, they did do a set of David Bowie covers in 2016. Nothing but David Bowie covers, because obviously the great David Bowie had died in January 2016. So this was a song that stood out from that. I think of this, much like Sun Hits Today, as being a song from the album that just happens to be released on a 7-inch or as a single, as opposed to any other format. And Space Oddity is lovely version of the song, actually. Really, really works. I really enjoy it. And Jest There Is, well, that's fine too. It's not a B-side. It's like a good album track, and works out very, very well. So there we go. And since the timeline's a little confused, it's not exactly sure which... Sorry, I had to answer the door, by the way. Since the timeline is a little confused, it's not exactly sure which one of them came first. Because to me, now memories are all blurring into one great big amorphous mass of stuff that's happened. Much like when Homer Simpson said, every time I learn something new, it pushes something old out of my brain. And with every day that I learn something new, it pushes something old out of my brain. And the something old sometimes is me. Who knows? So I'm going to have to check. This feels like this is their 14th, 15th studio album. It could be their 247th. They're like Motorhead with drugs. The Flaming Lips, they're always going. They're going to carry on going forever. They're probably going to die on the road. Who knows? But this is another Flaming Lips album, completely like all the other ones that you might have heard or heard of or smoked. And it was recorded between June 2012 and June 2016. And like much Flaming Lips material, I always think of their stuff these days as not necessarily being an album. This is a compilation of unreleased material recorded by multiple lineups over long periods of time. And you think with a 4-year recording time, and it has only been, let me think, probably about 6 months since the most recent album was released. Actually, the Miley Cyrus one came out on the 30th of August 2015. This came out in January 2017, a whole 18 months. I don't know how you coped. I kind of listen to this and think of it as being, an album which is another Flaming Lips record. Now, in the oldie days when you had 2 CD singles, a DVD single and a 7-inch in the UK, and you ended up with something like 40 songs that were B-sides across multiple singles. These days, the Flaming Lips would put all those onto multiple albums instead. So they moved from releasing recording lots of material in a continuous burst, and then releasing lots of material in a continuous burst over a long period of time. You end up getting these little stray tracks, like, Spider-Man, or How the Supreme Being Teaches Spider-Man How to Fall in Love from 2000 and whenever's Spider-Man 3, which is a dog shit movie. You get songs like that, and instead of those songs being on the Spider-Man soundtrack or being on the B-side to a CD single, since there are no CD singles, there's very little in the way of pop rock compilation soundtrack albums now. It would turn up in a repurposed form on one of these albums. And then you release albums more often. You do an album every year, every 2 years, like Prince or The Fall, Guided by Voices, Buckethead, someone like that. That's fiercely, fiercely prolific. And then the perception is that the albums aren't any good anymore, because firstly, they're releasing lots of them. And secondly, when you listen to the albums on an objective basis, some songs aren't as effective. They don't communicate to the audience as well as some of the other ones. But then that's what happens when you put a load of B-sides on an album. I call that the Tori Amos effect, primarily because I remember when CDs came in and you could expand out your track list. You weren't defined to being 45 minutes of vinyl anymore. You could be 80 minutes of music onto a single CD. And that 80 minutes of music inevitably featured some pretty ropey songs towards the end, and you had an 18-track Tori Amos album, Boys for Pele, where I thought if that album had been 12, 13 songs and the other 5 songs had been B-sides, you'd have had a much, much stronger record. Not saying that that's the case with the Flaming Lips, because they just released more albums, and I can miss an album for months on end and not even notice that it's come out until it's too late. So Oczy Mlody, recorded between June 2012 and June 2016, is effectively a lot of unreleased songs that have been put together onto an album and created into an album form. And they've probably recorded 40 songs in that period. Some songs have gone on to The Terror. Some songs have gone on to Imagine It's Christmas. Some songs have gone on to, all the other releases which have come out over time, and including the ones when, the other band members weren't in the studio, and then that becomes Electric Worms. And then all of a sudden your head explodes. You're like, the line between what is and isn't Flaming Lips anymore becomes really, really vague. And sometimes it's just the fact that it's been stuck on an album and called The Flaming Lips makes it a Flaming Lips song. But, there you are. And there'll just be a little credit about guest drums to, whoever and whatever. And probably Dave Lombardo from Slayer appears at some point on there. Cool. Actually, he doesn't, but there you go. The title of this album comes from the Polish translation of a book called Close to Home by Erskine Caldwell. And the Close to Home is also known as Blisko Domu. Now, if you're Polish, you will hear me pronouncing that and go, that's brutal, you stupid Britlander. And you're absolutely right, of course. But that phrase translates as the eyes of the young. The idea of looking at the world through the eyes of youth and innocence, and not naivety as such, but hopefulness. From looking at the world in a very innocent way. And when I was younger and I saw the world around me and I thought, that world is really interesting. I know how that works. I see it for what it is. And then you get older and the real world gets in. It starts to corrupt who you are. It starts to corrupt how you see reality. And then you end up with a different interpretation of reality to the one that perhaps you might necessarily really realistically be living in. So there we go. There are there's 3 editions of the album. I have 2 of them. There is a single LP. There is a double LP that features a bonus track, and that bonus track is called Listening to the Frogs with Demon Eyes. And that bonus track is also on the CD edition of Oczy Mlody, which is here. So I'm going to refer to this as well as the vinyl. And since it was recorded in multiple sessions, it covers multiple feelings as well. So it melds the psychedelic optimism of the Soft Bulletin and Yoshimi battles the Pink Robots and At War with the Mystics, as well as the kind of scary bad trip vibes that you've got through Embryonic, The Terror, and the Heady Friends album, where you get the feeling that you're kind of entering bad trip territory. Musically, it's groove-based prog rock, krautrock, where sound and texture is as important as the melody, similar to the vibe that you get from stuff like the 24 Hour Song, H Skies 7, and with one long song vibes, where there's one song, and the album itself feels like it's one long song that goes through multiple moments, and some of those moments are just a little bit quieter than others. And that creates the album as a whole. It's a good album, really, really good album, but it's difficult to pick out individual songs because each song is so perfectly sequenced. It feels like one blends into the other, blends into the other, and blends into the other, and then all of a sudden you have a moment where you suddenly finish the album. There's some really good songs on here. I think How, There Should Be Unicorns. I do really like We're Family, actually. as well, and the Castle is really good. The single LP edition, which was considerably cheaper than the £45 Super Deluxe version with the extra song about frogs on, is on here. Missing out some of the artwork, of course, and a standard black vinyl edition, which is probably rarer than the coloured vinyl editions, actually, given the circumstances behind, mass coloured vinyl production at these points. And I'm when people go, "Oh, it's an exciting coloured vinyl," and I'm like, "Well, it's the same record you love. It's just now in orange, green, purple, whatever." And it's a very good album, but there's nothing that stands out as being an amazing individual piece of work where you kind of go, wow, that's a mind-blowing song. And to be fair, if there were CD singles that had been released, no doubt there'd been lots of fantastic extra tracks that would have come out, but they didn't. Instead, what we got for Record Store Day 2017 was this. This is the Oczy Mlody live at the on board the International Space Station Concert for Peace edition, which is effectively alternate versions, remixes, and extra tracks from the same period, set on an imaginary concert at the International Space Station. This features How, Do Glowy, Listening to the Frogs with Demon Eyes, Niggity Nye, The Castle, There Should Be Unicorns, and We a Family. And actually, I love the concept of it. Is the idea that it's a concert that's played by the band, effectively playing the album live, but in a studio with totally tripped out space rock vibes. I'd like to thank Weird Coloured Vinyl for this version of it. This is the Record Store Day edition on a lovely bright red, which looks magnificent going around the turntable. But black is a colour, and black is cool as fuck as well. So this is an essential part of the story. Luckily, a few weeks after Record Store Day, this got the inevitable CD issue, which I haven't looked at it recently. It's probably £2.88 on Amazon's new and used from Music Magpie, because that's where I buy all my Motorhead records from, because they're all incredibly cheap over there. Oh no, I ruined it. I've now told you where I'm getting my cheap Motorhead CDs from. Yeah, oops. Well, there's no shortage of them around, is there? And if you don't, again, like the Flaming Lips, if you don't like Motorhead, well, there's another album coming up in 18 months anyway, and it's undoubtedly got a song about bastards and war on it. So there you go. So that's the Live at the International Space Station release. I really like that. I think of these two as effectively being, this is the original version and this is the remix version of the album, even though it says that it's live, it isn't. It's the band jamming out the songs live on stage. And there are 2 extra releases which come from this period. In fact, there's loads of releases that come from this period, but I'm going to just stick to the 2 extra ones that we have. So this one is a Flaming Lips guest vocal on an album by Vessels, and it's a song called Deflect the Light. And it sounds just like a Flaming Lips song that for some reason is on somebody else's album. Again, standard black vinyl here. I picked this up for about £5 because not many people bought it. Which is a shame, but it is a great track. Really like Deflect the Night. It's well worth listening to. Strongly recommended from me. I also like the last track on this album, which is not Flaming Lips. It's called Erase the Tapes, and it features America's finest human singer-songwriter, John Grant, who now lives in, I think, Reykjavik in Iceland, and has a lovely deep voice, a magnificent beard that puts mine to shame, and a record collection that's almost as good as mine. No, this is Deflect the Light by Flaming Lips. Very, very good. This is on the Vessels album, The Great Distraction, which has some magnificent cover art, by the way. When you look at that, is a series of lasers that meet in a single point, or a series of lights in a darkened room that reflect against a bunch of mirrors. And I'm all for that stuff. I love it. Really great. The one last release from this period, before we get into the greatest hits album, is the story of Yum Yum the Dragon. This is the 2018 American Record Store Day 7-inch by Flaming Lips. And this is the story of Yum Yum the Dragon on side B, and on side A, a track called Pouring Beer in Your Ear. It comes in 2 different editions. One is a clear vinyl with some alcohol inside it, the beer which this is in collaboration with, in partnership with the Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. And then, of course, the B-side, which is a children's tale. And in fact, I've never opened this. but I haven't. I've listened to it, but I bought it, and then I was like, well, if it's online, I don't need to open it. Oh, no, I have opened it. I have heard it as well, but I've mostly heard the online version. And the alcohol version of this, by the way, could only be bought in America by people over the age of 21, which, if you're a Flaming Lips fan under the age of 21, and there are a couple of you out there, I believe, is quite an obscure place to be. So that is the story of Yum Yum the Dragon and pouring beer in your ear, which is a lovely, silly song. Again, I get the impression that the band don't make albums, they don't make singles, they don't do anything. They just record, and then every once in a while they go, what have we got? Put together some songs that look and feel and act together well, and then lo and behold, you've got a Flaming Lips record. And that's an album. And then they tour. And, yeah, like a lot of tours, people will go, well, I just want to hear the hits. And then they pay the number 47 hit, which is still one of the biggest hits that they've ever had. Everyone's happy. Everyone goes home. And then there's the bit we go, well, we're going to play some song from the new album. And everyone kind of pulls a face and puts up with it for 5 minutes or 15 minutes or however long that experience might be. Fair to say, I've drifted from Flaming Lips over the time. They've become an album or become a band that I listen to as opposed to a band that I go to see. I saw them a few times. All the shows were exactly the same, like Motorhead, like, Depeche Mode, AC/DC. They know what people want. They give it to people. It doesn't change from year to year to year. I mean, it does a little bit now because the lineup's changed. Mike Evans has left the band, but it doesn't change substantially. And sometimes I kind of go, and especially I think this about, Erasure. I feel this about quite a few bands. I've seen them once and I'm going, that's okay. I think I've got everything that I need to get, or everything that I could get out of seeing the band. So, for example, AC/DC, I know even though the drummer and the bass player and the rhythm guitar player has changed since I saw them, I still get the impression that the AC/DC that I'm going to see if I go see them this year is going to be exactly the same as the AC/DC that I saw in 2009. The Depeche Mode experience is going to be exactly the same this year as it was to 2009. The Erasure experience is going to be very similar this year to 2011. It's going to be the same proportion of lovely hits scattered all the way through it with 3 token songs from the new album. That's the same thing I get with the Flaming Lips. I kind of go, I don't need to hear or see this repeatedly. It's okay. It's enough to drop in every few years and see how it's going to go. And at the same point, bands that change up the set list, move things around, I really, really enjoy that. I think it's really important to get to do it. But at the same point, you do have to keep an eye on respecting the fan base, which some bands don't do. You think about Morris's set lists, they're absolutely diverse. You kind of think, well, surely he'd play Suede Head and Every Day is Like Sunday at every show. No, there's no guarantee you'll even get one of them, because I've seen a couple of shows where he hasn't played either. And you're kind of going, that's, people want different things. And you have to think about that middle ground between being a valid artist and being what your audience expects, and being a jukebox that when somebody presses 9 you do the Elmer Dinkley joke. So there you have it. That is Flaming Lips album, Oczy Mlody. It also is, of course, the concert at the space station, the Vessels album, and the singles which have gone with it. Relatively short today because there isn't a huge amount in this period, which is vastly different from anything else, but it's good to keep an eye out for it. I would recommend listening to the cover of Space Oddity, telling me what you think. And of course, if there's a band that you want to see me cover, I've probably got them on my list actually, but do say, and I'll give it a shot. I have been asked about OMD. I don't know OMD well enough to do a session about them, really. I've been asked about Interpol. I like them, but again, I'm not so deep into Interpol. I can't do one of these. I'd be like the kind of YouTuber that I hate if I was talking about Interpol. And the kind of YouTuber I hate is a guy that does a reaction video and goes, so these guys in OMD, are they like dudes? Are they British? Are they like big? Are they a duo, or are they like 6 guys? And then they don't know anything about it. And then they listen and go, whoa! Whilst, Enola Gay plays, and you kind of go, okay, that's not worth watching. And I'd rather give you stuff that's worth watching, or at least stuff that I think is worth watching, as opposed to randomly make up bullshit as it goes along. I will, of course, randomly make up bullshit when I do another one of my random record Russian roulette episodes, which, if you like them, is brilliant. And if you don't have to watch them. There's another one coming up in a few minutes. Well, not a few minutes, but I will be doing one in a few days, I suspect. So, in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. And if you like, please subscribe. And if you don't like, don't subscribe and watch something else that's far less boring instead. See you later. Bye.